Hey there. First of all, thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. I'll keep this short. If you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do. And if you know of any friends, family, coworkers, neighbors, people you know at the dog park that you think could benefit from hearing our podcast, ask them to give us a listen and to hit subscribe while they're at it. We're trying to reach more ears in central Minnesota to get more minds churning. Thanks. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. For a lot of us, the concept of mental health care is tied directly to being in a state of crisis. And for far too many of us, we neglect our own mental well-being until we've reached that crisis stage. Resources at that level have been stretched thin for years, and oftentimes the waitlist for assistance leaves people without services when they need them most urgently. But what if we could change the way we think about mental health care so that more of us sought help before we reached that crisis point? This is Min Central Currents. I'm your host, Teresa Meese. This week and next, we'll be looking at peer-to-peer services in Minnesota that offer help for mental wellness and beyond. Next week, as we approach Memorial Day, we'll be talking about the folks who came home, the veterans who need to process their experiences, their losses, and transition back into family and community. This week, we're talking with two people who work with a peer-to-peer mental health service called Wellness in the Woods.
My name is Millie Richard. My spirit name is Spotted Bird Woman Going Around the Heavens. I come from the Dakota Ojibwe Nation in southern Manitoba, Canada. I'm working with Wellness in the Woods currently. I am a licensed peer recovery specialist. What that means is I work with mental wellness and substance abuse. I work off of the empowerment model more than the Western way clinical model because I'm in three areas. I work in recovery, and I'm a recovering person myself. You know, I've been in recovery from alcohol and drugs over 38 years. Also, I work in a tribal, cultural, spiritual way in our communities. I was trained as a horticultural therapist, and now I'm doing peer recovery specialist work. And that just really connects with what Wellness in the Wood does in terms of bringing more awareness about mental wellness in the community. First of all, I should back up a little so people can understand my background and work-wise. So I was in the criminal justice system most part of my life, through courts, probation, jails, prisons, reentry programming. Of course, a lot of alcohol and drug programming in the beginning when I was a younger person. And working throughout all that area, I always noticed there was an area that was never really addressed, and that was the emotional, mental area. I am more natural in working with people in that way, working with people in the garden, working with the plants, helping them to get that sincere, peaceful calmness when they might be having a really severe anxiety attack. Maybe they're having some sort of panic because they might have just lost someone close to them from an OD or something like that. So that really helps me to bring my skill out in working with people. And the challenges I find is when I'm working with families and they have the young people might have chemical dependency. I find that the mental wellness piece is not addressed too much. So what tends to happen is they become like revolving doors. Whether they're doing recovery, whether they're coming out from re-entry, whether they're coming out from a domestic violence shelter, all this ties into where one root of the problem that I feel is mental wellness, and no one is really addressing that piece of it. And, in a lot of our communities and other smaller communities, because everybody knows everyone, they tend to get afraid to talk about it outside of their home because they're encouraged not to. And there's no safe places for people to talk about their mental wellness when they live in a small community and everybody knows everyone, even the workers. So it gets complicated in that way. And I think that the stigma of mental wellness is really not helping our young people, because I'm sad to say just two younger people in their 30s just OD'd in the last few days, and this is going steady. Since the pandemic happened, a lot of the work that was being done in terms of substance abuse and this mental health piece, I think for the first time it was kind of coming out, and then all that stopped. Wellness in the Wood gives me hope to be able to bring this awareness out into rural areas of Minnesota, because working in one of the jails in the St. Louis County area is I met a lot of the younger people from the Iron Range. And I got to know them by sitting down and listening to their stories about their backgrounds. And some of them did share their mental wellness issues with me. And I did ask them, when you're back home and in your community, do you ever share this? They said, oh, no way. And I understood I could relate to that, because I see that same struggle happening in tribal communities, but also in urban settings. I always wanted to find a way to be able to work where the stigma of mental wellness, and I know they call it mental health, in their system is to make changes within the regulations, the policies, and the laws of the way the processes of these systems go. And one of those is the child protection services. When a mother might be dealing with mental wellness and the things that the hoops that they're jumping, when I feel like we can make it a little bit more suitable so that it's a little bit more workable for both sides and it's a win-win situation. And closing, that's what Wellness in the Woods offers me, is like a platform to be able to utilize the skills that I have and to complement the Western way system of mental wellness of what they have. We're not coming to try to take over, we're coming to complement of what the programming is out there already. So with that, I will close.
As Millie stated, one of the barriers to accessing mental health services in rural communities is a self-imposed one: the negative stigma that our culture has placed on seeking mental health care. My next guest.
Jode Freyholtz-London, Executive Director of Wellness in the Woods.
Well, what she said to me about the culture of mental wellness in the region was starkly honest and very relatable to those of us who grew up in such families and communities.
I'd had virtually no experience with any family members or close friends who were struggling with alcohol, and knew very, very little about individuals who struggled with mental health challenges, because it certainly wasn't talked about for pretty much in rural communities. But there's all these secrets between Stoic Lutherans, Stoic Germans, Stoic Scandinavians. We don't talk about that stuff. So even if there were struggles, I wasn't aware of it.
Was there something that happened that caused a shortage of mental health services, or is the need simply outpacing the resources?
Well, the need is certainly outpacing what was there. But I think another piece is that, and the folks who are doing this planning and systemic change seldom, almost never, but seldom ask those people who are receiving services or are providing them, especially in rural communities, what it is we want to need. They come up with a grand plan, hand it down, and then go, oh, that didn't work very well, did it? And so there's a multitude of planning. Don't get me wrong. I've worked with the Department of Human Services for a long time, and the planning goes on for years, literally years, but it does not include those individuals who are going to use those services. It often does not include the individuals who are doing the frontline peer work, who are providing the services. And so we also know that there's just a dramatic shortage of workers. And so you can build a really nice hospital, but if there's nobody to do that work, then you're going to have a really hard time being able to actually fill the beds because you don't have enough staff.
So, what does it look like for folks who are trying to access mental health services out in rural Minnesota?
So for me, it really depends on what service I need. If I need to call a peer line, which Wellness in the Woods has, that's available really easily and overnight just for some support that will hopefully keep me in a place that I don't have to use more restrictive services. Now, and there's also a crisis line that has a mobile crisis team that can come out and see me if I'm in a crisis. I'm fortunate enough that in my little town, Eagle Bend, is where my primary physician is. And so that's where I get my medication adjustments. If I were to actually need a therapist, which I'm not utilizing presently, I would probably, I think the last time I went was somebody in Little Falls, which is about an hour away. If I would need hospitalization, it would be at least an hour away if there was a bed, keeping in mind that if I was forced to be hospitalized, the community behavioral health hospitals, which are state funded, frequently have a waiting list of at least 3 weeks. The other options certainly are those voluntary hospitalizations like in Brainerd, and it's much easier to get in there. But of course, you have to go there voluntarily. So it's frequent that we have people sitting in emergency rooms for weeks, literally for weeks, sitting in emergency rooms with one-on-one staff because there's no place else for them to go, or are in hospital rooms with a nurse with them one-on-one, or law enforcement gets involved. And law enforcement is their responses to mental health challenges have increased dramatically, as have the emergency room visits increased dramatically. So when we talk to emergency rooms about possibilities, of course, they would love to see those visits go down, but then a lot of the work that we do isn't billable. So it's a conundrum, definitely.
So you've mentioned your service organization is a peer-to-peer support network. Could you explain what that is for our listeners?
When you think about peer support, I think about, for example, before my first daughter was born, and we went into birthing class, and that was a long time ago. That was 40 some years ago. And so I remember going in there, and our birthing instructor was like a 75-year-old nun. And I went, wow, what does she possibly, and she was great. I mean, she was a great instructor. But once my baby was born, the people I talked to were other moms. Is your baby yet? Do they have teeth yet? Is it normal for them? And so when we think about who our peers are, I think about the guys that are, my husband calls it the Duffer group, who all go down and have coffee together. And these are peers. They talk about the weather. They talk about last night's basketball game. They talk about whatever comes up. That's who peers are. And so when we think about this common knowledge, this common concern, that's what brings people together. This cohesion, this connection between people who have a lived mental health experience, we've been there. I mean, we literally have the t-shirt. And so when people come to us for support, and when we can say, I've been there, whether I'm doing a public speaking or whether we're offering support, there's that sense of calm where people go, oh, you really do understand. You understand what this is about. And the other piece that's really important in that is that we have proven that we're very capable adults. We can run a business well. We can schedule, we can pay our bills, we can make our appointments, because there's a lot of pieces where people with serious mental illness are thrown into a category where they don't show up for work, they don't pay their bills, they're violent. And so really we're doing a lot of myth busting in that as well. And when the peer specialist program started in Minnesota, we actually finally identified that experience was a billable service that actually helps people stay well before they get to that level of crisis. So we get as many as 1,800 calls a month on our warm line, and well over 300 interactions a month on our virtual peer support network. And people always tell us, this has really helped me from being into a place that's more serious and a crisis level.
So what sort of training do the peer support people have who answer your phones?
So all of our staff, I think we have 2 that are not certified peer specialists, and they're signed up for the classes, which is a 2-week certification in the state of Minnesota, which is all about learning how to support other people who are struggling. Now, we know that many of the folks who come to us for support may need a higher level, although the fact that we're called a warm line, less than 1% of our callers call who are in crisis. If they are in crisis, there's a couple of options. We can either give them some crisis resources, or we're able to do a 3-way call with them and actually make the call for them and get connected with a crisis level. But for the most part, they're calling us because they're lonely, they're upset, they're anxious. And so just having someone to talk to could make all the difference in the world, where in the past, a trip to the emergency room might absolutely be the only place that there is. Or, people get anxious, and then there's struggles with family members or neighbors, and then law enforcement gets involved. And so this really is a preventative upstream kind of service that's actually an evidence-based practice. Somebody researched this and said it's a good thing.
So, for example, let's just say a mother has a toddler and a newborn, and both of the children are crying, and now the mother is crying, and her mom isn't answering the phone, and so she's locked herself in a closet to just get away from everything for a second. Is that the person you want calling the peer-to-peer support network?
Absolutely, we do. We have somebody available to answer those calls every day from 5 at night until 9 in the morning. And we chose those hours because people said, that's when I need somebody to talk to. There's plenty of people during the day. Well, then we were doing some in-person social supports for people, and COVID came along and messed that all up. I talked to my staff who was running that program, which was called Imagine Network, and said, can you make this, if our funders will transfer, can you make this virtual in 5 days? And she did. Amy is our director for our virtual peer support network. her background is a professional chef, and she just made things happen. So we have that available every day via Zoom or phone from 10 to 4. And then, so there's only a couple hours that we don't have peer support staff available for anyone who wants to reach out.
So something that has come up over and over again in these conversations is the reluctancy of individuals to seek help at the earliest stages before something becomes a crisis. Is there anything you can say to encourage listeners to call in just when they need help at the basic level?
I really think that what we found is those individuals who join our virtual peer support network or call our line are, once they've done it once, they keep coming back. All we'll ask you is what county you live in, and there may be what county you live in. What would you do if you didn't have the warm line? But it's all anonymous. We do not have your call number. If you call us, we're not going to call, even if you tell us that you're going to do something harmful, we do not have your information. So that can be a little harsh. So we do a lot to debrief and really support our staff. But it's all anonymous, so we don't know who you are unless you tell us. It's a comfortable, but we have people call us and share recipes. I mean, it's become a pretty close ritual. Just want to call and share this recipe with you and let you know that I had a good day, or that I'm moving and that was difficult for me, or my dog died, or my cat's sick, or there's no judgment. People can call for whatever reason they want to. And the other piece that we're really working hard on with our new federal grant is really to meet the needs of our marginalized, diverse communities, as well as areas of frontier Minnesota where there's less than 7 people per square mile. So that's going to be an interesting project too. That's a 3-year project through SAMHSA. So I believe that if we're really going to reflect serving all of Minnesota, we work hard to hire and have board members who reflect those communities as well.
You've mentioned the Virtual Support Network a couple times. Would you like to tell us about that?
The Virtual Peer Support Network has been a real blessing for people specifically in rural Minnesota who do not have the access. And many of us don't need access to a professional, maybe once a month or once every 2 weeks or whatever. And with VPSN, they can join any day that they want to. They can play bingo. They can learn about stress skills. They can, this week or this month is May Mental Health Awareness Month. So we have special speakers on, and open mic Mondays, and every Wednesday afternoon, Dr. Hensley is talking about how to advocate for ourselves through civil engagement. Just really exciting times. And the other piece is that many of the people that we hire maybe have not worked for a long time. And so my background in supported employment, this really fills my heart for somebody to get their first lanyard, their first business cards, their first paycheck. And we pay everybody. Nobody volunteers except our board, and that's just a board's job. So having people have jobs successfully, we have an 80+% retention rate for our staff. And I think the people who leave usually leave to get another job. We become a stepping stone for them.
Are there any efforts underway at the state level to expand funding and access to peer-to-peer support networks right now?
Well, unfortunately not. The funding to train more peer specialists has actually been cut for the next fiscal session. And in addition, once people go through that 2-week training, it's kind of like good luck. There's no support for them. And so no. They have to find it on their own. There's no support helping them find jobs. Now this year we're having, and keep in mind, the very first class was in 2009. For the very first time this summer, we're having an all peer conference. So, and for years, Wellness in the Woods has been trying to build a peer association, but we don't have access to all the people who have graduated. That's tightly held information. So we have a very difficult time reaching out to all of the people who are actually, so I'm hoping that there will be some impetus during this peer conference that we find a way that we can stay connected. So we really truly do have a voice of, because there's many times where I'm fortunate enough that I've been appointed to a number of work groups and now are actually being invited as a peer voice. But there's times when we just have to go into the room and sit down. And if nobody asks us to leave, we just kind of stay there and keep coming back. Otherwise, our voice is overlooked. We just get forgotten. In 2017, we received some funding to actually plan a peer respite, which is a house where people can just go stay for a week. And so we did all the policies, the procedures, the budgets, the job descriptions, and we have not been able to move any further with that. And Wisconsin has 4 of them, and we have none. So
could you tell me more about what a peer respite is?
Yes, actually, the peer respites in Wisconsin, and there are a number across the United States. We actually had some folks come up from Lincoln, Nebraska, and what they found is where and I think there's usually room for like 5 or 6 people to stay. So there's no med management. It's just peers there providing support and a place for people to go. They can come and go as they want. Often are referred by emergency rooms, law enforcement, or self-referred, and they just come and stay and just have some time to kind of regroup. So when we figured it out, the annual operating was about $400,000 a year, but the savings was at least double that by keeping people out of because you don't stay in a psychiatric unit for a week for under 20 grand. I mean, it's just does not happen. That and emergency room visits and the dollars and cents that this makes is so it just makes too much sense. But we've had a couple of bills, and they get as far as the Health and Human Services Committee and won't be heard.
Who are your strongest advocates within the legislature in case our listeners want to reach out and encourage them to help move some of this forward?
John Poston has been a very strong advocate for us. Heather Edelson also we were visiting with her, and she was a really strong advocate. And then, of course, before they went into the session, it looked like we were going to have a deficit. And they're like, we probably better hold off on that one and then thankfully the economy changed, which is wonderful.
Well, thank you so much, Jode, for sharing information with us today about peer-to-peer support and your organization. In closing, would you like to fill our listeners in on anything you've got going on?
I certainly encourage people to go visit our website. All that information is that we just talked about is on our website at mnwitw.org. We do have some events coming up. One is Celebrate Aging, and that will be virtually, like everything is virtually, and there's no cost for that. That's on May 20th. And then May 25th, we have a multicultural conference where we have individuals from 5 different cultural communities talking about their community's perception of mental health and how we can support them. And I think we already have like 120 people signed up for that. And then in the fall, we have our annual conference. We'll have our 9th annual conference the 3rd Saturday. And there is a small fee for that. But our conference this year is called Be the Light. And we will be having our keynotes. One will be Brandy Brink, who started her own sober houses in Mankato. And the theme of her speech will be, it's fun to do the impossible. And Mr. Stephen Samra from Nashville, Tennessee, who owns his own peer company and is very vibrant and quite intense around eliminating stigma. And so his theme will be Stick It to Stigma. Both very entertaining, wonderful people to listen to. And of course, there'll be some other breakout sessions and an opportunity to play virtual bingo where you can win a prize.
Thanks again to Millie Richard and Jode Freyholtz-London for sharing their organization, Wellness in the Woods. You can find them online at mnwitw.org. This episode was developed and managed by Renee Carterell. Production by Riverside Productions, LLC. Music provided by Epidemic Sound. Contact us with your questions and comments at mincentralcurrents@gmail.com. That's MINN, Central, Currents with an S, @gmail.com. You can find us online at mincentralcurrents.org or on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube by searching Min Central Currents. Till next week.